Hello students, this is Varchana Raut, lecturer in computer science. In our today's discussion of slides, we will be discussing about a very interesting topic as well as a very important topic, that is motherboard and its components. So in our further slides, we will be discussing that what is a motherboard, what are its parts, what are the parts working principles, how do they collaborate to run a system. So let's start. At the very first, we will learn about what is a motherboard actually. So a motherboard is the main circuit board of the computer that is placed in order to join different parts inside a computer. It is known as main printed circuit board, or we also say it PCB, and the computer's central communication board, as it connects both internal and external peripheral components to the system. It has sockets for the connections, such as we can say CPU socket, RAM sockets, or we can say it slots also. We have expansion card slots, for example sound card, network card, and it also hookups the hard drives, disk drivers, and front panel ports with cables and wires. So all in all, we can say it as a main circuit board which helps us in communicating or helps us in connecting both internal and external components to the system. So let's discuss that what does a motherboard actually contains, what are the slots, what are the ports, and what are the different parts it contains. So we will discuss it with a diagram. This is, we can see the motherboard diagram. Here are all the parts that are collaborated in the printed circuit board. So here we can see there is a CPU port. As the CPU port generates a lot of heat, even if there is a CPU fan or heat sink mounting points over it here. Here we can see there are the memory slots. We call it as RAM memory slot or DRAM memory slot. Here are the IDE connector. Here are the power connector. We call it as ATX power connector. It is about 20 pin, or it is also found in 24 pins too. We have a chipset here, which is both the combination of Southbridge and Northbridge. The Northbridge, as it generates a lot of heat, is given with a heat sink. We have AGP slot too, we have PCI slots, we have BIOS and CMOS chip, we have connectors for integrated peripherals. So this is the overall diagram of a motherboard. Now we will be discussing about what are these parts and how does these parts work. So we will first discuss, or the first component we are going to discuss is the processor socket or slot. We also call it as CPU slot. It is an electrical component that attaches to the PCB and is designed to control all the work of the system. It is also called as microprocessor. So it is a special type of integrated socket or slot which is designed for very high pin counts. A micro ATX motherboard by Intel can hold Intel Core i7 processor, can hold Intel Core i5 processor. We will later discuss about what is Core i7 what are the difference between processor i7, i5 and i3. So this all is placed over the processor slot. Since high speed is generated during the processing of any operation in system, so CPU normally generates a lot of heat. So there is a heat sink and a mounting point pins for the fan right next to the CPU socket. So here we can see there in the diagram there is a CPU slot, and beside it there is CPU fan and heatsink mounting points in order to reduce the generation of excess heat. So next, after processor slot, we will move to memory sockets, or we can also say it memory slots. We also used to say it as RAM slot too. So we already know that why random access memory is inserted into the computer. It basically holds all the currently going on applications in the memory. So most motherboards have 4 memory slots which determine the type of RAM used in the computer. So we have DDR1 RAM, DDR2 RAM, DDR3, these are the RAM types of different processors, and basically this defines that the upgradation of RAM inserted on the motherboard. So we can know these types, that which one is DDR1 type RAM, which one is DDR2 type RAM, by some numbers printed on this memory slots. If it is of 1.2, it is of the latest DDR4 memory or RAM slot, which we find in i3 57 processor. And if it is 1.3, it is DDR3 RAM slot. If it is 1.8, it is DDR2. Similarly, these numbers define that what type of RAM it is. So most common type of RAM are SDRAM and DDR RAM for desktop and computers. So sodium RAM are used for the laptop computers. This various types of RAM basically defines the speed of the RAM. The more upgraded RAM slot gives more speed in the processing. So next we will move to the next part, important part, which is chipset. A chip forms an interface between the computer and the main memory and other components too. Basically, chipset on the motherboard is defined as the combination of Northbridge Chipset and Southbridge Chipset. In the diagram, we can see both the positions of Northbridge and Southbridge Chipset. Okay. Southbridge Chipset. It is just near to the RAM slots. Just back to the RAM slots is the Northbridge Chipset, and just side to it is the Southbridge Chipset. We are also provided with heat sink at the Northbridge Chipset, as it generates a lot of heat. So next, let's discuss about what is Northbridge Chipset, what are its function. So the Northbridge Chipset is also known as Memory Controller Hub, or MCH, or Graphics and Memory Controller Hub, that is GMCH, if equipped with integrated graphics. So basically the Northbridge Chipset work is to control the memory, is known as the memory controller, or we can say it is also known as graphics control. So it is known as GMCH, that is Graphic and Memory Controller Hub. Similarly, the second chip, that is Southbridge, controls the input and output functions. It is not connected directly to the CPU but to the Northbridge. This I/O controller is the physical interface provider between the input and output devices and the motherboard. So it basically handles all input output functions that is connected to the motherboard, or it basically provides a physical interface between input and output devices and the motherboard. So chipset is the combination of Northbridge and Southbridge. Here we can see a chipset architecture diagram in which basically the Northbridge work is to handle the memory and the graphics part of the computer, which is related to PCI. We will further discuss it in our next slides. It is an interface between the central processing unit by the FSB. The Southbridge basically handles all the input-output functions, that is PCI, USB connections, ISA, IDE connections. IDE is the integrated device electronic connections, that is related to the hard disk optical drives. So it also handles the BIOS, that is basic input-output system operations, and legacy. So legacy is the basic operation going on in the computer. So we will next discuss about, after chipset, we will be discussing about the cache memory. We already know about what is cache memory. It is a small block of high-speed memory, RAM, that enhances PC performance by preloading information from main memory. So basically, what is the concept of cache memory? The cache memory concept is that the applications we used to use very frequently is stored in the cache memory, so that when we again process it or we again retrieve it, it does not come from the main memory. It rather comes from a small block of high speed of memory, that is, it comes from the cache memory. So it enhances the system performance basically. So instructions and data can be read from it, and even if can be written to it much more quickly than in case of normal RAM. Cache memory basically increases the computer performance, or we can say it increases the computer's speed. Most CPUs have an internal cache memory, which is a built-in to processor, which is referred as level 1 or primary cache memory. It can be supplemented to external cache memory fitted on the motherboard. This is known as level 2 or secondary cache memory. So the basic built-in cache memory in the processor is known as level 1 cache memory, and if we want some extra cache memory, or we will be studying it about the level 2 cache memory in multi-processors, that is dual processor, that is quad processor. There we use level 2 of secondary cache memory, which is an external cache memory fitted on the motherboard. So next component is the BIOS. The BIOS, or basic input-output system, is a ROM chip which is found on the motherboard. It basically allows to assess and set up computer system and at its most basic level. That is, it stores all the booting instructions when the system starts booting, and we see the window. All those are stored by the BIOS chip. We will be next studying about all the functions of BIOS and rest all components of the motherboard. Thank you.